of the press. I also add my voice in thanking you for responding to our invitation to help us communicate some of the issues we would like to get to the wider public. This, as has been indicated, is a fairly short communication, mainly touching on what I promised at the last presser, to specifically talk about the elders' report, and more precisely on the controversial issue that has now been generally termed dirty money in the FDC. But secondly, I will touch on how this controversial matter is impacting on the processes of the Forum for Democratic Change that is very, very concerning. And lastly, I intend to touch what then we could possibly do going forward. I've prepared a written statement, and I think you'll get copies of this statement so that it helps as a reference point of what I am saying. First, the dirty money. The background of it, as you may recall, is that while addressing the National Council meeting of FDC, to which I had been invited to deliver a keynote address in November last year, I asked the permission of the chair to explain a matter that had become topical in our party regarding my absence in the 2021 presidential campaigns, or the overall campaigns, the general elections. And having been given the permission, I indeed explained, first of all, why I was not available to be a candidate, and that having been a candidate for the Forum for Democratic Change in the previous 3 elections, and even one before the Forum for Democratic Change was formed in 2001, I had considered it necessary to be clear to the party that I would not be a candidate in 2021. And I did this through a formal communication to the party leaders at a meeting that was held in Choto in Namugongo in 2018. That was more than 2 years, in fact, close to 3 years before the next election. And the purpose of that meeting was to cause the party to select their next flag bearer in good time, since this would be a new flag bearer. And I pointed out to them why I would not be available for selection as a candidate in that election. So that was one of the points I communicated to the National Council. My absence as a candidate. The second point was my absence as a campaigner, and I pointed out to them that there were two main reasons why I did not become a campaigner. The first one, which concerned me, was the whole question of the funding that I had got very credible information on as having come from the very place that we sought to dislodge from leadership. And that we had tried to discuss this with our colleagues whom we were convinced were involved, and that those discussions did not yield any results. So first, there was, at the very minimum, suspicion of hostile money having come into our party for the elections, and from a source that could only be hostile, which was not adequately resolved to certainly my satisfaction. But that secondly, as if to indeed confirm my worries, that when the candidate was eventually selected, the candidate, as usual, selected a campaign management team, a campaign bureau, which is absolutely critical for a presidential election. Because a presidential election is a campaign that's held in the whole country and within a short time. And it's critical that there is effective campaigning going on across the country, even where the candidate is not and where the candidate has been. And it's also such a team that mobilizes resources that are necessary, planning and resources that are necessary for the conduct of the campaign. So a campaign team was appointed, but shortly thereafter disbanded. And so we had a presidential candidate without a campaign management team for the first time. That then cannot be a serious campaign once you have no planning and no management of such a process. And as I have said, this on top of having got information that the money actually came from another candidate, sort of confirmed to me that it was intended to weaken any or to avoid any serious challenge to where the source of the money had come from. And so, in that regard and considering the risks of the campaign, especially in that particular campaign where there was COVID, I decided to stay away from campaigning also. Now, having addressed the National Council in those terms in November of last year, the matter then now became more discussed within the party, and certainly it spilled into the public and now became a public debate. But I would like to also once again point out that between 2020, when this information came up, and 2022, when I presented it to the National Council, there was a lot of attempt at trying to indeed get to the bottom of this matter and manage it within the confines of our party. Because even if one may be without consultations made a decision to raise funds from such sources, if it is understood that this has happened, it could be managed differently to immunize the party from the dangers it would face. And we took a lot of time trying to do that. Regrettably, we failed, and that is why it came to the National Council. And of course, once I presented it to the National Council, the Honorable Nathan Nandara Mafabi then offered an immediate response to the National Council. And on the basis of that, the National Council, considering that these were just now pieces of information from me and from him, they, in their wisdom, decided to set up what was termed the Special Elders Committee to inquire into this matter. And the Special Elders Committee was not appointed until 6 months later. And the reason for the delay in appointing the Elders Committee was a controversy that immediately arose as to who should appoint the Elders Committee. Whether it should be appointed by the National Executive, whose members were indeed to be inquired into, or whether it should be appointed by the chairman of the National Council, to whom the committee would then report. As it turned out, eventually it was decided that the decision of the National Council was to be implemented by the National Executive Committee, and that the National Executive Committee was to appoint this Elders Committee. And indeed, the National Executive Committee, or rather the President of the party, made recommendations to the National Executive Committee, the appointment of his appointment. And I understand the National Executive Committee approved his appointments of the Elders Committee. Now, that is, I think, where part of the weakness of this committee lies. in that it was appointed by the accused and would report to the same accused. In fact, it was inaugurated by the accused, and on the inauguration, assigned the task that they were supposed to do. And I did not learn of the task that was given to them by the party president, the Honorable Amriat Oboi, at the inauguration until I appeared before this committee. And the task given to the committee was rather strange, because their main task was then to reconcile me and the Honorable Nandala Mafab, and by so doing to bring harmony to the party. And I'm sure, I hope you have got copies of the elders, this special elders committee, because it's now a public document. And you will see what I am talking about contained in that report. That their mission was to reconcile us. Now, as I presented to the committee, when I eventually met them, I did not have, and I do not have up to now, any personal matters, issues with the Honorable Nandala Mafab. In fact, until this money issue arose, I considered him not just a colleague, but even a friend. And it was on that basis, indeed, that he entrusted me with 300 million shillings, which I will be also talking about at this meeting. He entrusted me that 300 million shillings just between the two of us. There is no record of any kind, no acknowledgement, note or anything. That could not happen if there were issues between us. And so I told the committee that there are absolutely no issues between me and the Honorable Nandala over which a reconciliation is needed. That the issues at hand are issues of the party and affecting the party and its officials, how the officials of the party are running the party. And that I had indeed pointed out to the National Council that set up the committee that two things needed to be focused on. One, the money, and two, the management of the party, and especially of the campaign. And having said that, I went ahead and narrated to the committee what happened from the time the Honorable Nandala Mafab entrusted me to keep his 300 million shillings up to the time I reported to the National Council. So I gave them the whole narration of what happened. I also pointed out to them that therefore they will help the party primarily by establishing the facts relating to the money, and that the facts would be found in the accounts of the party and the records of the party. Which accounts and records we had been inquiring into ourselves prior to my appearance before the National Council, but had been denied because eventually they said we were not entitled to such information. So I thought that this committee now was going to help us get the facts. Because up until then, and I dare say until now, even as we sit here, nobody in the party knew where the money came from, how much it was, and how it was employed. Up to now, there is no, because at the time this information came, there was an acting party president, the Wechitiibwa Joyce Nabosa Sebugwao, who of course has since left us. And in fact, in her departing quarrels, this was one of her concerns, that she was the party leader, money came, and she didn't get any information of any kind about the money that came, where it came from, how it was used. In fact, she said she had lent 20 million to the party because there was no money to be used, while at the same time there was money that was already in the party. So neither the acting party president then, nor the substantive party president, the Honorable Patrick Amri Atoboy, knew how much money had been secured by the party, from where, on what terms, and how it was being used. And so that's why I emphasized to the committee that this is the best help they can give to the party. Establish the facts. How much money came, whether borrowed, whether donated, whether stolen or whatever, how much money came to the party. How was it deployed? And the committee told me they were going to indeed inquire. They said they had many people to interview, and that is what eventually they reported on in this report or vote. Maybe before I leave the committee situation, it's also maybe pertinent to point out that the committee had been appointed as 7 members, One refused to take up the appointment, and I don't know what happened. So actually only 6 turned up as members. One of the members is a vice chairman of the party, and therefore a member of the chair that would receive the report. So he was clearly inquiring into the matter that he set up. This anomaly was pointed out, but he didn't consider it necessary to recuse himself. And one of the members eventually resigned from the committee with protestation of how the committee was conducting itself. And he especially in his protestation, written protestation, pointed out that the committee secretariat of the committee, the secretary of the committee, who I understand was appointed by the Honorable Nandala Mafabi, was recording wrongly what was being presented to the committee, and that his protests were not addressed. I think he had also other issues that he raised in his protests. It may also be noteworthy that while this committee was going on to inquire into the matter given to it by National Council and later directly appointed by the executive, the same members who appointed it set out to present information to party leaders across the country on matters that the same committee was inquiring into. They held party leaders meetings in the districts of Busoga, Bukedi, Bugisu, Teso, Wrangle, Acholi, West Nile, presenting now even documents to these party leaders to argue about this very subject that they had assigned to the committee. Now that obviously was violating the purpose of setting up the committee. But even more concerning, in one of the meetings which sat in Iganga, the chair of the committee of elders also attended, where these violations were happening. And I pointed out to him that this was very imprudent, to say the least. So that is a rather long background to the report that we now have, 19-page report, which, as I have said, is now a public. Does this report say? Maybe before I turn to the report itself, it is fair to give details of one of the things that has been focused on regarding this dirty money. And that is that 300 million that the Honorable Nandala gave me. First, the Honorable Nandala has been telling a lie to say that he told me it was meant for agents, polling agents in that election. Clearly, if he had said it was party money meant for agents, I would have provided the obvious solution that it should be placed on the party account. Because whereas him as a person would fear, and he told me the reason he was giving me the money was that he feared Revenue Authority, that Revenue Authority was demanding money from his companies, and that if he placed cash, that if he had cash on his accounts, Revenue Authority would pounce on it, and that it would be difficult to recover it. And I know that is for sure happening with the Revenue Authority. There is the law they passed called that gives powers of garnish, where the tax body, if you owe it tax, they can confiscate money that is on your account and pay themselves the tax. And if you have any queries, you go to the tax tribunal. And people who have suffered that injustice from Revenue Authority, once they go to the tax tribunal and they show that they did not owe Revenue Authority does not return the money even then. They say, okay, sorry, we now have we know that you don't owe us, so we shall keep on deducting this from your future. From your future obligations. So Revenue Authority is actually a thief. Because that is really stealing. And this is going on widely. And that's why I had sympathy with the Honorable Nandala when he told me that he had tax issues with the Revenue Authority, and that's why he was keeping cash out of the bank. But if he had clearly told me that this is money for agents, the party has no tax issues. So the money would have gone to the party account, and if the party, the only issues the party can have with the Revenue Authority is maybe payee, if they have not remitted their payee to the Revenue Authority, which certainly would be even then a totally different matter. So it's a lie that money was extended to me to keep for party agents. In any case, this was September. The election was going to be was it January or February? January. So why would why have to keep money for that long for agents? So that is the first untruth. Having given me that money, as I have pointed out previously in other communications, it was about 2 weeks later that I got specific information of the dirty money. And but maybe before I get to the information, I told the Honorable Nandala that my home was obviously not secure, because my home is always being surrounded and sometimes searched. So I told him I can't keep it myself, I would keep it somewhere, which I also discussed with him that could be safe. And my first concern came with the arrival of the money, because the money arrived at my home at 10 p.m. He rang me, he had told me he would send the money. We met here actually when he told me it was about 8 in the morning. But the money arrived at about 10 p.m. And he rang me saying that the other thing I talked about is about to arrive. And I said, but Nathan, where is it passing? Because this is curfew time. There was curfew then. And people were not allowed to move. And those who were allowed to move certainly would even risk to carry such money in the curfew time. But he said, don't worry, it's about to arrive. And indeed, before long, somebody was hooting at my gate. I opened, and it was his driver alone. He was one man in the car, and he told me, here is what was given to me to deliver to you. It was a big box. Now, because of the worry I got of that money arriving in curfew time, I thought very quickly, because I thought this may cause me problems. Because if it comes and some people know that money has come here, and I have no way of getting it out. So I can be found with this money and maybe it has issues. So I thought quickly and got one of my helpful neighbors to accept to keep something for me he wouldn't know. And so I detained the driver, having given me the box. Well, when I received the box, I opened it. It contained brand new 20,000 shilling notes, packed, of course, in 20 millions, wrapped with polythene paper, with a Bank of Uganda label on each bundle, showing the number of the note, the numbers on each note in the bundle, the serial numbers. And that too got me a bit unsettled, but I anyway transferred this money out of my home before I released the driver to go away. And it was then 2 weeks later that the information about that money got to me. The first information, I got 2 pieces of information. The first piece of information got to me. And shortly thereafter, I think within the week, I got the second piece of information. And in the second piece of information, I got slightly more details about some people to whom some of that money was given. One of whom was the party president, the Honorable Amuriat Oboy, whom it was said had received 280 million. And so I thought it was helpful to begin with that one and see whether it was indeed true or not that he received the money. And so I called the Honorable Amuriat, and we met, and I asked him, did you receive money from the Honorable Nandala? And he said, yes. I said, how much? He said, 280 million. Did he tell you where it came from? He said, no. But in the NEC, we had passed a resolution that we should borrow money. So I assume that this is part of what was borrowed. And I said, okay, if it was borrowed, would you know how much? He said, no, I'm not even sure that it was borrowed, so I don't know how much. I just got this money. I said, so what are you doing with it? And he said, well, at that time, he was moving around the country with the Honorable Waswa Biligwa in the primary campaigns for the flag of the party. So he said, I am using part of it in that process, in the movement around the country, and that they had also agreed that while they are moving around, he should identify candidates and maybe help some of them who needed some help. And he said he was keeping accountability. So having told me as much, I now shared with him my own information. And indeed that I also had 300 million in my custody. And I said, so what do we do with this information? And in the event, we decided to engage those who were involved in the meetings, because the information we had got, there were meetings before this money was got. There was a budget made that was taken to State House, and then the money came. So those who were involved with that information, who were the Honorable Nandala himself, the Honorable Jack Sabiti, the Honorable Jeffrey Ekanya, we said we meet with them, and I invited them myself, and we met here in our garden. Just to be sure there was somebody that was not part of that as some kind of a reference point, I also invited the Honorable Wafula Ogutu here. And I introduced to them my information. I was promptly challenged by the Honorable Jack Sabiti, who said, how can I ask the party leaders where they are getting money when they themselves never asked me where I got money when I was party leader? Isn't it double standards? Why are you now asking these ones? And I think that question, for me, summarizes, and it has actually been kept on being played. In any case, if they get money and it helps the party, what is the problem? Clearly, there is gross underrating of the gravity of this matter. You know, receiving money from, because, you know, our struggle has been very costly to those who want change. You know, many people have died, Many people are maimed. It's emotional. For people to think that, the change you are fighting for, and, at some stage, the Honorable Jack Sabiti said that for me, I am moved by hatred, that I hate Museveni. That I hate Museveni, and that is why, I react in the way I do. Far from it. This has nothing to do with individuals. It has everything to do with how we procure change in this country. First of all, if there is a need for change, and how we procure change. Because you've heard us say over and over again that our country has been captured by the family of Mr. Museveni. Not even by an institution, not by NRM, not by even the military, it's by the family. And we know what has happened to institutions where the money has gone from that institute, from those sources. So to trivialize it and say, because the supposition was that maybe me also, I was getting money from there. Why am I asking others where they are getting money? But if anybody would have information that the very problem you want to remove is the one facilitating you, and you keep quiet about it, then you are self-abetting treason. You are helping the destruction of the mission. So anyway, that meeting which we held here did not yield results. After that, the Honorable Nandala pulled out some files that he wanted to explain where the money came from, that it is his money, but we didn't get into those details. Save for that having been the first sign for me that poor Patrick Amriat was also involved, because the reason I approached him first was that my information was that he was not part of it. But when I invited all these for a meeting here, he was the only one who knew why I was inviting the meeting. So when I saw Nandala pull out files to give explanation when I had not told him why I was inviting him, I immediately knew that he was informed in advance what the meeting was all about. We tried still, shortly after that meeting failed to generate any progress, but it was clear that we would not make much progress, mainly because of the election activities that were taking place at the same time. So we decided to sort of freeze the attempt to establish and manage this until the election ends. And as I have pointed out, that was part of the reason I did not want to be involved in that campaign. Of course, we carried out the same attempt after the election, which we have talked about already. Now, when that information came to me about dirty money, I quickly went back to the money which had been given to me and removed those labels from Bank of Uganda, which were showing the notes, the serial numbers of the monies involved. And that is because new money coming out of the central bank can be traceable when it is released to circulation. That's how they ensure that there are no counterfeits. The serial numbers are traceable. And especially if it is new money, like we had now, it's possible to know where it was released to. So I recovered that information, which eventually I also supplied to the committee of elders, but which I also used myself to find out more information about this money. So after failing to make progress with it, nobody talked about what we should do with this money. In fact, I was consulting with my colleagues, what should we do with this money we now think is problematic. But as I have said, there was the whole hula-barrow of the election going on then. And then I am in Rukunjiri towards the election itself, that they want the money to use it for agents. And that was the first time I heard of this story of agents. Said, the other money, you can have it. Now, since I was away, I suggested to him that it can be put at my petrol station in Zambia, where there was some security, and that it can be picked from there. And I informed the person where it was being kept to then deliver it to Zambia. And I was completely under the impression that that had been, and the other point I wanted it delivered from Zambia was that I wanted an acknowledgement of the delivery itself, that the money was returned. And when I asked the manager I had in Zambia, she said yes, the money was given to the administrative officer, I think, of the party, and she had signed. It's only now during this inquiry that I have heard, so neither the people in FDC nor anybody in Zambia told me that there was any problem with the delivery of the money. I only now learned about it during this inquiry, when indeed the Honorable Nandala Mafabi was distributing papers to show or suggest that I received 300 million, but returned 299 million and something. that there was 600,000, I think, which was not returned. I had not heard about that at all, either from the party or from my manager. And so when, and the other thing he was indicating was that it was delivered, it was returned on different, in installments. So when that came out, I obviously had to investigate what had happened. And I indeed established that it was true. The money was received, I think, in three or four installments, but that was the wish of the lady who was receiving it. It was not because there was no money to receive, but that she didn't want to take it at a go. That was her request. Secondly, I got to learn that part of that money, because it had stayed where we put it for long, and that during the election time, money becomes devalued, loses value, that they decided to translate part of it into dollars. And so when I said, please return the money, they also returned the money still in dollars. But the dollars, apparently, instead of gaining value, which was expected in the elections, actually the value had gone down. The exchange rate had gone down, leading to that difference in the money that was not returned. As I have said, clearly nobody informed me about this. There was absolutely no reason I would want to keep 600,000 of money belonging to the party with me. If I wanted, I could have kept the 300 million, because there was no, I did not sign for it anywhere. Nobody knew, even I had it. It's me who told all the people that were involved that this money had been brought to me. And so I acknowledge that the 600,000 or so that is being talked about was not returned. Certainly I was not informed. And you know, if they want the, if I have where to put the money, I have no problem returning it. I have actually written out a check. I'm only worried about whom to give it. Because I wouldn't want it to go into the hands that are dirty also. But that is the disposition of the 300 million that was brought to me. 100 million was supposed to be part of the distribution, because indeed there were others who received, and I think even if I had used it, there would have been, that's what I think was intended, that I use it, but that's my own suspicion with hindsight now. Now, so let's go to the report. The Committee of Elders did not make the slightest attempt to establish the facts. Zero. In spite of my having pleaded with them to do so. They did not check on the party accounts or party records. They did not improve the knowledge that we had before they were formed. In fact, their only written finding Their only written finding is that this was a very sensitive matter. Beyond that, they only record what each of us told them. That's the only, so there are minutes of the meetings that they held with different people. That's all that this report is. They did not attempt at all to find the facts. So even in this report, you can't, and somewhere they say that Honorable Nandara himself says that he's the one who lent money to the party. They didn't even ask him, how much, sir, did you lend? So even that was too sensitive to be asked. And that he told them he withdrew the money he gave me from one of his accounts. Even that they did not, that he supplied some papers from some company maybe which he owns or has interest in to show that he had money in the bank. No attempt at all to establish the presence or the source of money or how much, under what terms. If somebody says, I lent to the party, okay, you lent to the party. Is there an agreement between the lender and the borrower? I mean, at least the committee would have established whether if there was money lent, what were the terms? From who? And where was it placed? Was it placed on the lender, on the borrower's account? What happened to this? Where did the borrower put the money, and how was it accessed? Nothing is contained in this report. Indeed, having found nothing, their recommendations are not surprising. Recommendation number 3, grooming young leaders. Recommendation number 4, amendment of the Constitution. Recommendation number 5, absence of an organogram of the party. Recommendation number 6, development of party alliances. Number 8, and the last one, management of opposition African political parties. So, neither in their findings nor in their recommendations did they seek to deal with the dirty money, save as I have said, just recording what each one of us told them. And even then recording it in a biased way. Because as I have told you, what I emphasized to them is not in the record of what I told them. And I have only been able to see this from their report. So, I don't think that the value of this report is even equal to the paper on which it is written. Frankly, it is totally worthless. Certainly, what it doesn't do, therefore, is to absolve those suspected of having got dirty money. I have been seeing in the media, the report absolved. Where in this report does it absolve? It doesn't. because it even never sought to do so. And I think the Honorable Nandala and his colleagues really did not do themselves justice by not using this committee, the opportunity of this committee, providing the facts that would indeed absolve them. Because they could have done so. They could have brought, like he said, he had lent money to the party. He could have just brought the documentation of the money he lent to the party. As we talk, at least from what I know of some of these people who sit in NEC, nobody in the party up to now, nearly 3 years later, nobody knows how much money was borrowed or donated. Even if you want to keep the source, they say that the sources are sensitive. Okay, sources are sensitive. But how? From Mr. Museveni himself to an organization that is seeking the end of his junta is not something comparable. I've had people comparing it with maybe getting contributions from people who have an association with the movement. That's not comparable. Even if they were cabinet members, there are many people in the cabinet who want change, actually, and who will quietly contribute to the struggle. Just like our members go at night to State House. Many from State House also come at night to talk to us. Because they are also there, but they want change. So yes, you can get contributions from such, but not from the very captor of the country, and you hope that that is all right. And would be the motivation of Mr. Museveni paying money to his opponents. Well, you've seen him himself bragging that by 2021 there will be no opposition. That's what he was hoping to achieve by 2021. By what means was he intending to achieve that? Because people keep on talking, you heard what was going on in DP. Oh, you are green outside, you are in Suju, you are yellow inside, you are green. And that, where the money goes, you see a change in approach. And specifically, it seeks to achieve two things. First, to fight against those who seek change not through the means that Mr. Museveni would want them to do so, which is the rigged election. If you are campaigning for elections, he'll give you the money even, because the election is within his control. But if you are agitating outside elections, you are the enemy. And we've had time to talk about the type of elections he continues to organize. So that is one of the reasons the money is given. It's to undermine those who seek to use potent means to get rid of him, of the system that captures Uganda. Secondly, it is to stop cooperation of all those who seek change, the working together of all those who seek change, unity to fight and get out of oppression. To the party. First of all, it has already made the party more or less dysfunctional. Because a party functions through its organs. The National Executive Committee is now totally dysfunctional because members within that committee, whom you saw addressing the press last week, have views that the leader of the party does not want, and so NEC will not sit. Some members even have tried to call it on their own, and he has said the Constitution gives me the power to call. You cannot call and it becomes NEC. And I guess he's right. So there is no sitting now of NEC, which is supposed to run the party. So the party is now run on decrees. In other words, there is a coup in the party. The party is being run on decrees. 2020, but it was said that because of COVID, elections then were not feasible. So there is an election, it's an election year. And we are now going through which were totally ignored, and those who are managing the party at the helm continued in total disregard of NEC decisions. And the Electoral Commission, which is supposed to organize these elections, has huge problems now. I think the most public one was that it announced that it has already conducted grassroots elections in 93% of districts. And the districts are there, they are not invisible, they are there. You can, and even where the elections were said to have taken place, I think you members of the media were very helpful in exposing the lies. I saw NTV at somewhere in Luzira, I think, in Luzira in Nakawa division, inquiring about where the elections had taken place. And they said they had taken place at some church, and they asked the gate man there, he said, no, there has not been any person here. They have been making calls, appointing people into the structures of NRM, some of which calls were recorded and have been shared and so on. So there is a very problematic, no, the structures of FDC. I said NRM? Oh, sorry, it's because it's always a problem. That we are talking about of dirty money and how it is resolved and of how the party is managed have now crept into the process of renewal of leaders. And clearly, the Electoral Commission, at least by its own pronouncements, is totally discredited. There are other factors that would discredit it, but at least that is the most obvious public source of, I have never seen anything anywhere near the chaos that I saw at Najanankumbi, where the National Council was supposed to take place. And the people have been in Rosira, and so on, many were injured, and so on and so forth. And all the other scenes that you have seen, which included beating up members of the media at our headquarters. All these are very, very troubling, but very real. So the last bit that I would like to address. The way forward is obviously a very challenging one, because one gets a clear sense that the leaders in control of the party today at the helm, the party president, the secretary general, the treasurer general, and these concerned leaders have clearly dug in. They are not at all willing to reflect on the huge responsibility they have to be in charge of that party. They are determined to move on, selecting leaders until they renew their own positions in the party at a delegates conference. So, in short, as I have said, there is some kind of a coup in the party. The party is captured. The resilience of FDC can be relied on to free the party to function in normal ways. We must, even as we organize the liberation of the country, I think the members of the party have a duty to attempt, at least, to liberate their own party.
One Uganda, one people. One people, one Uganda.
The reason they are allocating seats and so on is to create a new reality. But I think there is still room to challenge the attempt to create a new reality. Because if they had held a delegates conference, the National Council, I believe, will have to sit again. To be undertaken, our members need to, therefore, within the districts, mobilize, organize, and resist what is going on. No option but to create a transitional leadership that will reorganize all the processes to a new leadership. Because clearly, First of all, the leaders now are expiring. They are supposed to expire. But secondly, they are now encumbered with all these issues. So I think it will be important if or when the National Council sits to, if they want to, if they are charged to rescue the party from a path of destruction, they should create a transitional leadership. Will appoint competent firms or people to undertake a forensic audit of the party. Forensic audit of party resources. I think it is important, it is critical, and in the benefit of all, so that we know the truth. Something which we could have been saved by the Elders Committee if it had directed its mind properly. Wrangles within parties have the effect, and maybe intended effect, of diverting us from our main focus of liberating the country. That's our main focus. So we are held down trying to sort out in-house issues and not paying attention to the capture of the country. We must be reminded that, first of all, these parties are being captured because the country itself is captured. The candidates for elections, we are charged with uniting all oppressed people to see that we resist those who captured our country and freed it from them. That's what
people, Jacksa BT, Patrick Oboya Muria, Party President, and also the Secretary General, whether they came to apologize to you, as I am informed, and what exactly they came to apologize about. It's a point of hatred that you talked about.
Dr. Kizza Jimmy Mwanika.
Ezisobola okufunika weziri. Waliwo yabuuzizza ekipya ekisobola okukolebwa singa National Council eddamu okutuula. National Council esobola okutuula era nga bye bimu ebirina okutunuulirwa ekibiina bwe kinaaba nga kyakudde engulu. Bye bimu ebirina okutunuulirwa, security mwetuulira, nti tetuula wakati mu bakifeesi nga bwe walaba naki nti wabaawo okukaanya security enayisibwa etya n'entambuza y'olukiiko enaaba etya. So kisoboka, kikyasoboka, naye sigamba nti kijja kusoboka. Kikyasoboka naye kisobola obutasoboka, naye kikyasoboka era kyetulina okulaba nti abantu balwanirira okutuukako. Bwe kinaaba nga tekisobose okutereeza ekibiina, still wajja kubaawo ebirala ebigenda mu maaso mu kununula eggwanga, kubanga ekibiina kino twakizimbawo kituyambe mu kununula eggwanga n'okuleetawo enkyukakyuka eya demokrasiya. Jjukira nga nze abamu nakati bakyanvunaana kubanga nali wa NRM, nali wa NRA, ow'eggye ya NRA, nali wa NRM, naye NRM yalina ebigendererwa 10, ebigendererwa 10 nakati tukyabirwanirira, byo tetubivangako, ye yabivaako. NRM yava ku bigendererwa byayo nebula, ffe ne tusigala nga tukola ki, nga tulwanirira ebigendererwa ebyo. Era gye yabulira mugiraba byekola, bali mu kubba amabaati,
n'ebirala bali mu kutta abantu be baali bakuuma tulugunya abantu zidrone biki so yabula NRM neva ku bigendererwa byayo naye abalwanirira ebigendererwa ebyo bo basigalawo nga balwana be bannansi abaagala ensi edde mu mikono gyabwe bannansi siffe naye bannansi bonna baagala ensi edde mu mikono gyabwe ne FDC bwe balyamu olukwe nayo neebula bajja kusigala era nga balwanirira ebigendererwa bino bye bimu tebajja kuva ku mulamwa kubanga kyetwagala yensi kudda mu mikono gy'abantu era abantu ebaweereze kyenkanyi nti buli omu alina eddoboozi eryenkana agabana kyenkanyi emikisa egiriwo tugigabana kyenkanyi abantu kyebalwanirira n'olwekyo tekikoma kubanga waliwo abawambye ekibiina ebibiina nga nzize mbagamba abantu bwe batabirwaneko ne bwe kitaasibwa nakino ne bwe kitaasibwa bwe kibanga tekikyusiddwa munda mukyo okugema abalala abagezaako okukiwamba era kijja kufuna ebizibu ebirala n'olwekyo ekibiina kisobola okuwambibwa kisobola okwetaasa okuwambibwa alipooti y'akakiiko kati yafulumizibwa buli omu waddembe kugifuna ekikulu mu yo ekyangu okutegeera nti teyagezaako n'akamu okunoonyereza ku mazima agakwata ku ssente ate nga nze bwe nagituukirira kyekimu ku byebyo ebikulu bye nasaba tiwabeewo okufuna amazima agakwata ku ssente agava mu alikodi ez'empapula z'ekibiina alikodi za banka kubanga banka z'ekibiina weziri ssente meke zayingira mu banka yaffe oba ezayingira mu pate mu makubo amalala likodi za pate zandibadde zeeyambisibwa okulaga ssente mmeka zavaawa bwe tubanga twazeewola ku nzikiriziganya ki ey'okuzeewola ebyo byonna nakati tebimanyiddwa muntu yenna mu kibiina n'olwaleero teryamanyi mu kakiiko mu alipoota eno kawandiise buli omu bwe kayita bye yakabuuli bo tebalina kye beenoonyeza nga bo kye bateeka muno nti kye baazuula kyokka kye baazuula ku lwabwe ensonga zino nsonga za kwegendereza kyokka kye bawandiise muno nga kye baazuula tewali kirala kikulwabwe kye baazuula so byonna babuulira babiwandiisemu ne babiwandiikamu na bubi ebingi tebabiwandiiseemu nandala byeyababuulira powa byeyababuulira ani byeyababuulira so bawandiise minutes ez'enkiiko ze baatuusa naye sikutuyamba ensonga gye baali bakubuulirizako okugyongezaayo mu kutegeerekeka ekyo nze ndowooza kyava mu ngeri ky'akakiiko kennyini gye katondebwawo kubanga National Council yalagira nti wabeerewo akakiiko kano yalagira mu mwaka oguwedde mu gw'ekumi akakiiko tekateekebwawo okumala emyezi 6 kye nategeerako nti ekyaleetera ebbanga eri eddene waliwo okusika omuguwa wakati wa abakulembeze ba executive ya party n'abakulembeze ba National Council kwani asaanidde okuteekawo akakiiko kano ku nkomerero abakulembeze ba National Executive be bakateekawo ate nga bye kaali kakunoonyerezaako byali bibakwatako bo butereevu era mu kukatongoza baakawa omulimu gwa kutabaganya Besigye ne Nandala gwe mulimu ogwakakwasibwa kusinziira ku bye bawandiika. N'olwekyo ndowooza ensonga emu lwaki tekanoonyereza amazima agakwata ku kizibu ekituleetedde emitawaana gino. So akakiiko tekalina kyekayambye, tekabuulira kibiina ssente mmeka ezayingira, zaavaawa,